My name is Joff Peter Norman Bradley. I live in Japan. I'm an Englishman. I was born in northern England in a town called Bolton. My discipline is philosophy. I've been studying philosophy maybe more than 30 years. And I termed the concept critical post-media. My research topic. What I have been attempting to do is to look at cities like Seoul, cities like Tokyo, cities like Delhi and Mumbai, and thinking about the question of the smart city. What is the smart city? And thinking about how myself as someone who reads philosophy and writes on philosophy can respond to what the smart city is. Philosophically, I was trying to understand what an advanced city, a technological city, like the smart cities that are springing up across the planet, what that means for the question of identity and the question of subjectivity and the question about psychological health. So part of my research is to look at the problem of the Hikikomori syndrome in Japan, which is the social recluse problem, and therefore to kind of resist some of the psychological problems that young people are suffering in their everyday lives. For example, addiction to technologies and withdrawing from society because of the stress of everyday life. It's seen as a kind of a technological solution to the problems of urban life, the problems of population growth, the problems of sustainability and ecological well-being. So I begin to think, how do I respond to that reality, the reality of the smart city, and then to maybe offer some critical perspective on it. And the idea of withdrawing from the world and being intoxicated with technology means that there's a kind of loss of relationship to the local environment. Now, what does that mean? That also means a loss of a relationship to other people, to forming relationships with people, and I think that's a really grave reality, and it's occurring over my experience of teaching in Japan for 25 years. It's happening more and more with young people, and I felt that there's a need to respond to that problem philosophically. The smart city is a kind of, from my perspective, it's seen as a kind of technological solution, which is what Songdo was envisioned to do. And I tried to do walks through the city, and I found it very, very difficult to do. I found it almost impossible to engage with the city like I would with an organic city. And I have some kind of resistance to that solutionism. That means to say I wanted to pick up on philosophers like Félix Guattari, like Paul Virilio, a famous architect in France, and a philosopher who I've just started to read now for just maybe 15 years, who is Bernard Stiegler. And I wanted to put those philosophers together, along with Gilles Deleuze, to make a model. So I began to research about it in detail, and to see that there's some way we can use Bernard Stiegler's philosophy and Gilles Deleuze's philosophy to look at cities like Songdo, to look at cities like Tokyo, and to look at the real problems Korean young people have and Japanese young people have, and increasingly young people in other cities around the world, and then to offer a kind of unique perspective on that. And he has a concept of the subjective city. That is like new models of the self's relation to itself, the self's relation to other people, the self's relation to the environment, the self's relationship to technology and things like that. And that means that we have to make the city a place where people can build a community, can restore community, can restore a relationship to their local milieu, their local environment, which is healthy and constructive and productive. Now, someone like Bernard Stiegler criticized the smart city a great deal. And so I began to think about it like, okay, so my experience of being in Songdo, I was thinking that maybe that means my struggle with undertaking a derive, a wandering, was kind of suggested that there's a real problem in my relationship to the smart city. And so that became very, very interesting for me. And so I began to take a perspective from Felix Guattari to understand the need to make the city a place where we can breathe and we're not suffering from not only environmental damage but also psychical and social kind of illnesses. Well, as I said, the crisis in the production of subjectivity, I borrowed from the Italian philosopher Maurizio Larrasato. Japan, as you would know, has been suffering the bubble, the collapse, the bursting of the bubble economy for now nearly 30 years. And someone like Larrasato says with that comes damage to psychological life. So that is the loss of the production of new forms of subjectivity. Now that seems to me to suggest that is symbolic of the crisis of the production of subjectivity. Now I'm wondering that in other cities across the planet that is also happening. But what I mean to say is that the model of economic life, the model of social life and the model of psychological life in our advanced capitalist societies is leading to an explosion of mental illness. And I'm focused on Korea and Japan and India to try and work out what's really taking place. Why is it that young people more and more are withdrawing from the world? Now it seems to me that this withdrawal from the world was already taking place before the corona pandemic. Young people have a real struggle to form communities, to form groups. During the pandemic, that this would be a time for human societies to reflect on the way that we organize our social life. Think about how I can contribute in some small way to helping young people as they make their way in the world. And I must say that it might sound strange for a philosopher to be speaking about the smart city. I mean, why not speak to an architect or an urbanist or a civil servant or a city urbanist? Now, it seems to me that philosophy has to do something. It has to respond to the way the world is, or maybe even the possibility of thinking about how to use technology in a more curative or therapeutic sense. So I think from my perspective, I'm looking at Seoul, I'm looking at Tokyo, I'm looking at cities in Mumbai, and thinking about technology and trying to think about how to make a new philosophy of technology. From that, drawing on my research in France, in Europe and further afield. Well, I am working with colleagues in the Czech Republic now to think about the phenomenon more of the Hikikomori problem, as I mentioned, but also to look at in terms of a new form of therapeutics, a new form of psychological perspective. And we're going to start studying more on phenomenology and to try and draw on Japanese philosophers and European philosophers, and hopefully we can turn to Korean intellectuals and academics as well.